Hmm. Amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But under the right circumstances, a producer could make more money with a flop than he could with a hit. Hmm. Yes, it's quite possible.
Welcome to the NFC Leaks Show, the only podcast today keeping the NFC East honest. Williams, how are you doing?
Feeling very dishonest. Ready to get to work, ready to argue with you. The weather's beautiful, so it's a great time to be indoors.
It is a great time to be indoors for month 10 of a global pandemic. This episode has been long hinted at, long discussed. This is the first episode of our NFC East ALL-2000s team. Are you pumped? I'm pumped.
I really can't wait.
So for the listeners, what Sean and I have decided is we're going to be doing the front seven first of the defense. So this episode will be our picks for the best NFC East players in the defensive front seven of the decade of the 2000s. We agreed this would be from 2000 to 2009. I'm really excited to talk about the defensive line. This felt like the only obvious position group to start out with, just given how the NFC East has a defensive front seven fetish across all four teams. So many great players to choose from here. Do you want to start with the, I guess first let's talk about how did you pick your team? Like, what did you pick a specific formation in the defense to kind of build your team around? Walk me through a bit of your thought process on the defensive side.
Yeah, well, I think first things first, in the spirit of any NFC East team, I do think it's built from the front seven out. And so the way that unit plays informs kind of the style that the rest of the team will have. Really, the only other equivalent is on the offensive line, which we'll get to eventually. But I decided to go with a kind of, I wanted to cause as much chaos as possible with the talent that I had. So a lot of aggression, a lot of speed, just trying to evoke panic. And so I went with a 3-4 because I think given the players that I had to work with, it just made more sense. I think it makes the team faster, makes them more aggressive, and I trust that the secondary will hold up on the back end.
I gotta say, I think you hit the nail on the head. The NFC East starts in the trenches, no matter what. Even if the rest of the team is absolute dog shit, I think most NFC East teams year in, year out have at least a passable defensive or offensive line, especially in this decade. I found it pretty hard. Even the mediocre teams throughout this decade, like Washington and for half the decade, the Cowboys, just had great players on both lines to pick from. I like your little Art of War style mindset about wanting to actually taking a strategic route. For me, I also picked a 3-4, but it had nothing to do with thinking about how these players would actually play together. It just, there were too many good edge rushers, and right. I wanted to pick them all.
I mean, that's my real reason, but I thought mine sounded cooler. Yeah. And I also think, I was just thinking about, at least the way that I was constructing it is like, how would this team play in the 2000s, like with 2000s rules, which means at least until 2004, a little more violent getting after the quarterback, certainly more physical, kind of at the snap with receivers, right? So that was a consideration as well. It was just like, I thought about, okay, what was the most successful team in the 2000s? The Patriots. What else is new? And what did they run? Kind of a classic 3-4 with, Richard Seymour and Teddy Bruschi or whoever. Like, I think that in some ways, I just wanted to get smart and fast. So yeah, very, very Art of War and very cool of me.
Yeah. Very cool. Very Sun Tzu. I'm very proud of you, Sean Williams.
I am often compared to Napoleon, Alexander the Great, all the big ones.
Yeah, very often compared. I have heard it so many times. Just stop playing Civilization, dude. You gotta stop. Yeah, I mean, one thing I think we're gonna start from the D tackle spot and work outwards. I think also D tackle, the only thing we could potentially debate is just the player we picked because it's the most straightforward and self-explanatory position. I feel in like making a 3-4 defense out of 4 teams that predominantly ran a 4-3 for most of the 2000s.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling every other position in this front seven, we're going to have debates about whether they're actually a fit for the position we picked them for. And D tackle is like the lowest risk fit position. So let's start that. Who is your nose in this idyllic 3-4 defense?
This is a hard one for me because I feel like this is my most egregiously homer pick, maybe of all the picks. And I am anxious that I'm saying it as my first one, but it's big old Fred Robbins of the New York Football Giants, mostly because he was the largest guy available. Because, to your point, most of the players we're picking run a 4-3 traditionally. I'm giving up a little bit more size on the defensive end side, which we'll get to. And so I just figured I need to double down on like a classic run stuffer, a guy who weighs 330 pounds, very 2000s-esque type of player that unfortunately you don't see as much in today's game, where even your defensive tackles are like Aaron Donald and, just a little more slim. So yeah, I went with Fred Robbins, clog up the middle, get me a couple sacks, just be a boring old glut in the middle of the field.
Man, I went the exact opposite.
Oh God.
I hear you, and I appreciate you taking some strategy here. I think I am just too much of a product of the Andy Reid, Jim Johnson era of defense, of just like speed balls and get to the quarterback first, and then the linebackers will mop up behind it. And I think I just, given the strength of some of the linebacking talent also in this front seven, I just kind of trust that like I can lean on them a bit more in ways that maybe the current iterations of the Eagles can't. But I did not pick an Eagle as my tackle. I picked Jay Ratliff from the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys as my nose.
Yep.
A little bit undersized compared to Fred Robinson, but I just love Jay Ratliff a lot, just as a player, and I just sort of trust that he can do enough in run fits, but he's going to be a huge problem combined with the other ends I have for the offensive line in pass protection at all times.
Yeah.
And it just seemed too obvious of a pick not to exclude, even if he's a little bit undersized. Yeah.
Jay Ratliff was actually my second pick. Because as crazy as it is, he's probably really came down for me. The other guys I was considering, I had Corey Simon on there. Ultimately, I think just too small. I think he's even smaller than Ratliff. Leroy Glover, same thing. Another guy who kind of terrified 11-year-old Sean and is now forgotten about, sadly. But yeah, Ratliff was definitely high up on my list. I think his versatility is clear, and I do think I'm sure we'll agree, no matter what ends we pick, that they'll be good at stuffing the run, even if they are a little undersized. So I'm good with that choice.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up my list to see who else I had thrown out there to pick from. A few of the other D tackles I had, just in my initial combing of it. Yeah. I had Barry Cofield.
Yep.
Jay Ratliff, Leroy Glover, and I had Hollis Thomas, Corey Simon, and Darwin Walker, which is probably all of my homer picks of just like all three probably had no business being in the same conversation as
Darwin
as Jay
Walker,
Ratliff.
definitely not. The other two are okay. Corey Simon is, I think, legit, but like Darwin Walker is kind of like, hold on a second. That's like if I put Dave Tollefson as like one of our defensive ends.
He was in the running for me, man. I like Darwin Walker. All right, so I don't have a lot of a problem with your selection. I'm not going to like hold you to task for it. It is interesting that you called out Leroy Glover because I did a little bit of a true 3-4 alignment here. And just to segue into this, go into the defensive ends, the two hands down guys. I actually picked Leroy Glover as one of my ends on this line.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That works for sure.
Yeah. It was hard leaving him off. And I just think that he was already kind of a swing guy as well, even though he's playing interior. And I just think in like a 3-4, like, I kind of likened it to like the sets where the Eagles would play Fletcher Cox as like a left defensive end with like a true nose when they were doing like a 3-4 in the Chip Kelly years, right? It's like when you have a guy that's that good with his hands and that good in pass rush and you're playing a 3-4, he can help also cover some of the mess that Ratliff may leave in runs, right? Yeah. So I actually picked Glover as one of my 3-4 ends. Hands down, get after it. Who was your first defensive end?
First of all, I do like the Glover pick for sure. I honestly didn't really think of him as an end, which maybe I should have gone back to. I took Hugh Douglas, put him at right end, a Jets legend, but then later, put in some really good years with the Eagles in the early 2000s. He gives me size. He's a menace. And at his peak, when he was healthy, definitely one of the top all-around ends in the NFL. So I had to go with my guy, Hugh, get an Eagle on the board. I still have his football card somewhere in my parents' place.
Oh, wow.
Sure. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Hugh Douglas. I actually... I went back into my initial like kind of pruning list to say like who was in my thought process before, but I only included a couple honorable mentions across my actual final list, and Hugh Douglas was my honorable mention at defensive end.
Right.
So he was definitely in like the top tier of ends I was considering, but I ultimately left him off to make my second end New York Giants legend O.C. Umenyiora. I had to.
What? Wait, hold on.
I had to.
Hold on.
I had to.
Hold on.
I had to.
This is a troll job. This is a troll job.
No, it's not.
Okay.
I really like O.C. a lot.
This is unreal.
How is this unreal? Who did you pick?
Michael Strahan, New York Giants legend.
Okay.
Michael Strahan.
Strahan isn't not on my team.
Okay, you have Strahan? Okay. I can't wait to see Michael Strahan as your tight end because man, you have Strahan playing a linebacker in a 3-4. Okay, we'll get there. I
do.
All right, walk me through. Okay, well now I'm cool with it because now you have two Giants. So walk me through your OC pick here as defensive end.
I mean, the logic here was basically it might as well just debate Michael Strahan as the stand-up guy at this point anyway, because I was looking at the edges available, and I couldn't not pick both OC and Strahan, and I just thought Strahan would play standing up better than him.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some Strahan definitely, especially like late when Spagnuolo was running NASCAR, definitely was playing upright a good amount. I think Strahan's just a better, like a very good run stuffer, which is why I was comfortable with him being in end in the 3-4, even though he's definitely undersized for it. It's just because his technique was so good. He's very good at sealing the edge. And, but I mean, OC certainly gives you some heat. in the pass rush. There's no doubt about that. Although,
yeah, I think for me it's just like I look at just Strahan's build and just like how violent he was with his hands, you know, and I just trust that like if he was coming now. Also, if I'm like the defensive coordinator of this defense, I'm being creative, right? There's going to be some 4 down sets. There's going to be some 3 down sets, right? The few times that I have Strahan maybe having to pick up, or the edge having to pick up some passing responsibilities or just like shadow a running back or something, I trust Strahan more to like do the work and like be passable at that than I do OC. OC I just sort of see as like a amazing lineman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But not like a great like utility defensive player in the same way I think Strahan can be, even though Strahan was uniquely great at being a lineman, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I think OC has always kind of reminded me of Dwight Freeney in that he's like a speed rusher, you know, who just in certain games and certain matchups was unstoppable, forced a ton of fumbles. Came from the same side as Dwight a lot of the time. So
hey, and you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe I trust you more and I swap him back. You know? But to me it's like I'm having my right side of my defense being held down entirely by Strahan and OC. Double team.
You better I'm okay with it. I think I'm sure you will have one guy in particular in the linebacking core who can really stop the run, because that would be my thought right now is like, okay, Ratliff, OC.
I mean, that's
Glover
exactly
can definitely get after it, but
that's exactly where we're going to.
Yeah, I think I know who it is. I think I know. Well, we'll see if I'm right. So I went Strahan on the edge just quickly. We already talked about that. I did consider OC, ended up not going with him or picking him on my team. I also considered Justin Tuck, who is really hard to leave off because he actually has the size to be, I think, a 3-4 defensive end. Definitely bigger than OC or Strahan. But
Tuck was definitely in my calculus as well.
Yeah.
Here. I just, for some reason, I couldn't, you know.
He's just not quite on the same level.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So.
Yeah, so sorry. So you had Strahan hands down as the end in your 3-4. Since I already gave away that he was my edge, who's your first edge?
My first edge, we'll go with DeMarcus Ware as my first edge. We'll see how that shakes out on your team. I don't want to anticipate too much, but to me,
he's my second edge.
Yeah,
so we
right.
can talk. We can have this be a DeMarcus Ware.
Yeah,
we have a DeMarcus Ware love fest / hate fest for a few seconds.
Yeah, a both fest for sure. Because he would basically be kind of like how you're using Strahan as like a optional when you want to go into more of a 4-3 or have his hand in the dirt. I think DeMarcus Ware very comfortable in that situation. Can kind of do a little bit of everything. If he's put out in coverage, he'll be okay. So again, just like with my theory, it's basically big Fred Robbins in the middle and then speed kind of everywhere else outside of Hugh Douglas. So Ware gives you, a ton of dynamism off the edge.
Yeah, DeMarcus Ware is so good. Like he single-handedly carried that Cowboys defense for a very long time. I think as I'm looking at just my entire lineup right now, I think where maybe I was thinking was, all right, in terms of hands in the dirt guys, right? I think OC is the weak link in these three, but he was too good to leave off of the team, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got two kind of bulkier guys offset. I can see Strahan coming off the side with Glover on the end, who can kind of cover the run for him, and Strahan can just sort of rush and be a swing pass guy. But then ultimately I'm trying to scheme if either of these edges need to be responsible in pass pro or pass coverage rather. That I'm trying to funnel as much of that in Ware's direction as possible, and just have him line up over OC, and OC's just a speedball, right?
Yeah,
and like occasionally to like throw the offensive line off, I'll send both Ware and OC coming off one side.
Just overload, a lot of speed, make the quarterback to make a bad decision. I hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Who else was kind of in your line edge conversation before we go on to linebackers?
I had Trent Cole in there.
I did as well, of course.
Yeah, kind of a flexible. He would probably have been a linebacker in my setup. But I had him in there. Honestly, I combed through a lot of linebacker types that I thought maybe they could play the edge. I kind of decided against all of them. So really for me, it was Trent Cole and OC were the other kind of speed guy considerations to fill that pass rush 3-4 linebacker spot.
Yeah. I actually didn't have any. All right, here's a good question. Do we call them Redskins because they were a point in time Redskins?
I thought about that. I think I thought about that earlier today. I feel like if we do that, it'll seem like this whole thing's an excuse to say Redskins. And it just like we don't like. There's no reason for us to do it.
I don't support. That team name.
Yes.
But it's very hard to not see them as that in that point in time.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's just resolve to say would-be football team members.
Yeah. Washington.
Would-be football team members. Future football team members. Future football team alumni.
Yeah.
How about that?
Football team, Ring of Honor type guys.
I actually didn't have any of them in consideration. All of my linemen were either Eagles, Dallas, or Giants.
Yeah, I had the same. The only guy for me was I did think about Cornelius Griffin at defensive tackle for a minute, but even that's kind of biased because he played for the Giants to start his career. So
I ended up picking all three of the Cowboys I had filtered out. The only Giant I left off was Tuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only Eagle that made the cut. Actually, no Eagles made the cut.
Yeah. Wow.
But I picked 7 of them as like my first
the rest the entire offensive unit is gonna be Eagles, which is honestly hard to argue.
Only Hugh Douglas almost made it, but that's already showing a bit of my Eagles bias, and I'm already like picking 7 that don't deserve to be there. But I was throwing out like, what about Hugh Douglas? What about Javon Curse? What about Burgess?
Javon Curse. No.
But I couldn't, in good conscience, pick the one season Javon Curse experience over Strahan.
No.
Any of that.
No, we'd stop talking. So I didn't talk about my other edge linebacker because technically we had Strahan. Strahan's fucking up everything. So
no, but I thought you said Ware was your other one.
Ware's my first one.
Oh, you didn't.
Yeah,
you didn't. You're
my,
right.
My,
all right.
My
all
3-4
right.
is Douglas, Robin, Strahan, and then Ware.
All right.
And this one is a fun one, I think.
Ooh, this is gonna be good.
Penn State legend, unironically, Penn State legend LeVar Arrington.
Wow. Okay. What?
Yeah, LeVar Arrington. Because go ahead.
No, I want to hear you lay out this case.
So LeVar Arrington is like kind of notorious for being not a bust per se, but a disappointment at the NFL level after putting together probably one of the most prolific college careers of all time at linebacker U, Penn State. Came into the league and within his first 4 seasons had 3 Pro Bowl appearances And then kind of injuries caught up to him. I know he was kind of ragged for taking plays off or having a poor attitude. I don't know how much of that is real or how much of that was like early 2000s, like just made up stuff. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. It's so hard when to think about like what was this player actually like before they could express themselves on social media or anything. Yeah. Like this is a different era. But LeVar Arrington, I mean, he had a season where he deflected 11 passes and forced 6 fumbles and had 11 sacks with like 100 tackles. And I think he was being miscast in his role in Washington, which I would think probably a lot of Washington fans would actually agree with me on. He was dropped into coverage too often. Granted, he would be my coverage linebacker in this scenario, but kind of like you, I'm more just playing a 5-2 here, sending a lot of heat all the time. He's so fast, so aggressive, hits hard, classic 2000s player. I thought he could do a little bit of everything for me, and I thought it was a nice little experimental pick.
Yeah, I love that pick because I actually struggled. I feel exactly the same as you about LeVar Arrington. In fact, just to throw a little bit of real 2000s nostalgia, whenever I did like a franchise mode with the Eagles in Madden, I would always hunt LeVar Arrington in a trade, right? because the Madden like valuation of it based on his real world perception was always undervalued, and I could always get him for like a 5th round pick or something, and he just like ran around the field, tackled everybody. I always thought he was underrated at the time. I wanted to get him on this team, but just with how my roster ended up falling, I really admire that you threw him at the edge and what he can do there. Because I think what my problem was I couldn't, like, I wanted OC on my line. I needed Strahan and Ware, and I just couldn't see Arrington outperforming either one of my 2 inside guys at the job I need them to do in this defense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I couldn't reconcile putting Arrington on the inside. Basically, we just swapped Arrington and OC in terms of once we got past the Hugh Douglas / Leroy Glover end situation. Yeah. But yeah, I just thought, a ton of speed. Like I think I think my front 7 is capable of putting up like 55 to 60 sacks a year on people, like, just really constantly hammering the quarterback. And I think I'd rather have, if Arrington is like missing a bubble screen every once in a while, whatever, because he's going to hit that running back even harder later. So like, just get physical, be on jacked up a lot, just, 2000s vibes.
Yep. Love it. So yeah, so you kind of summarize it. We are pretty much in alignment except for swapping OC for Arrington and then Glover for Douglas.
Yeah, and then Robbins, Ratliff, but like pretty close so far. Nothing too crazy.
Mine's a little bit, feels like mine's a little bit faster.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Douglas is not like fast per se.
Yeah.
I think Arrington's really fast. I think we're going to see how the linebackers shake out. I'm very interested in the middle linebackers. I think I'm a little bigger than you. I think I probably stop the run a little better than you do. You probably defend actual Brian Westbrook types out of the backfield a lot better than I do on screens and, kind of crossing route type stuff. For sure.
All right. Do you want to just do both inside linebackers at once?
Yeah.
I'll tell you both of mine.
Yeah.
All right. I'd be surprised. I feel like we're going to argue about these. either we're going to be in complete agreement or we're going to be so not in agreement. All right. So my 2 were Washington future football team alumni.
Yeah.
Legend, London Fletcher.
Okay.
And the Axeman, Jeremiah Trotter.
I knew. Yeah, that's who I was hinting at with the whole run stuffing thing.
Yeah,
you
knew it. You knew it. You knew it. You knew it had to be that way.
It's gonna be Trotter. Yeah. Okay. You want to walk me through it?
Yeah, I mean, I needed to just, warriors at that position. Like I needed two guys that would clean up everything.
Right. See, this is an interesting because your team is otherwise maybe a little smaller and a little faster than mine. You went in this direction where your two interior guys are more heavy hitter. I mean, London Fletcher, total tackle machine. Like, literally finished his career with over 2,000 tackles, which is mind boggling.
I basically picked two heat-seeking missiles to clean up every mess that my line and my edges end up leaking in their quest to get to the quarterback as quickly as possible.
Totally. Yep.
And I feel like in this division, I love London Fletcher. Obviously, I love Jeremiah Trotter. They just seem like the two most obvious people to pick, but I know that you're going to subvert me right now.
Okay, so can I start with, I actually have Jeremiah Trotter on my team. He's one of my linebackers. Because once again, my whole philosophy here is like what I envision 2000s football as, like just hit very hard, like very, very hard. Concussions? What are concussions? Never heard of those because we've had so many concussions. So I have Trotter, I have the Axeman as just kind of like that last line of defense, probably the emotional leader of the front seven from like a get fired up standpoint. I admire a good victory celebration, and he has one of the best ones in my opinion. People, here's my take for the day. People imitate the Ray Lewis, like the Dirty Bird thing way too much, and people have forgotten about the actual best linebacker celebration, which is, I think, throwing the axe down. It's so smooth. It comes when
I love that. The
transition from like a big hit to like crawling on all fours and then scrambling up only to throw the axe down and like kind of get on all fours again is an awesome sequence. So style points for me.
For any Washington fans listening, let's also give him props. He did spend some very good years in Washington as well. I obviously love him for his time in the Eagles, both during the NFC championship and Super Bowl run years. Then also he came back as an old man in the later 2000s and was still very playable and very good. Yeah. Like it was kind of crazy. Like we could never replace Trotter, and then old bad Trotter still outplayed every young guy we tried to draft and develop to replace Trotter.
It's still kind of boggled my mind when he got cut in training camp, like as an old guy. Like, and I remember my friend's dad was like, well, he probably can't run like a 5.5 40. And I was like, yeah, but he's Jeremiah Trotter, man. Like, what are you doing?
Man. Trot's a legend.
Yes.
Couldn't not include him on this list. And I think you're so right. He does typify 2000s football. It's like, like throwing his whole body into things. I think half the reason why he got cut in training camp was just like he literally wore his body down in the year 2005, and but his career kept going for another 4 years. You know.
And also, probably as the philosophies change, like once it's 2008, Jeremiah Trotter becomes less of like a jacked up, like standard and more of like a walking OSHA violation for everybody else in training camp. Like, do I want Jeremiah Trotter to kill my starting running back? Maybe not.
Yeah, you don't want Trotter, decapitating Carell Buckhalter.
Oh man.
All right, who's your other inside linebacker?
It's Antonio Pierce. It's homer time, baby. Okay, so hear me out here. Hear me out. I thought about London Fletcher, who, in my opinion, also is frankly the only other real consideration on this list. I had like a ton of linebackers here, but most of them weren't even like that good. Like Carlos Emmons, Dahani Jones, Marcus Washington I had on there. Like guys who are like fine, but not like guys you'd want on an all-decade team. London Fletcher, 100%, probably just like on pure accolades, the best line of any of the linebackers that we've actually picked here. You know, like that's just how good he was. My only issue with London, what?
I just love that you're like, London Fletcher, objectively the best linebacker.
I didn't. That's why I took Antonio Pierce. No. Hold on. And this was my reading of the rules, but he only played 3 years in the 2000s for Washington because before that he was on Buffalo, and ultimately for me that wasn't enough production time. I guess he had a couple years, like from 2010 to like 2012 or 13 or something. He was a stud until he was like practically 40 years old. But from like my technicality brain and mostly as an excuse to get Pierce on there, I did not include London Fletcher, but I can acknowledge that, you know, if there was no such thing as volume, if it were just peak, he would be on my team.
I also critiqued Fletcher like that, I guess, but I guess I don't know. 3 years is plenty, and also Hugh Douglas. Come on, man! You picked him, and he played.
Yeah, I know.
3 years for the Eagles in the 2000s.
Was it only 3 years?
Yeah, man. Well, he was with them in the 90s.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, but I don't care.
Like Douglas's 3 Pro Bowl years with the Eagles were 2000 through 2002, and then he left.
Then he played in 2004. He got 3 sacks.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, look, I hear you. The Hugh Douglas thing, I was thinking about it as I was saying, is it hypocritical? Would I be 100% okay with Fletcher? I might I would make that switch for Pierce. I could do that. But Antonio Pierce,
make the Antonio Pierce case.
Yeah,
this isn't a Pierce over Fletcher discussion. This is a give me the merits of Antonio Pierce.
I mean, Antonio Pierce played his entire career within the NFC East from 01 to 09. And he was one of the most cerebral linebackers. Really, if you talk to Giants fans now, the last good linebacker we had, which might be a little unfair, and a guy who could actually get out in coverage, very shifty and speedy, lateral side to side movement. I thought he was the perfect complement to Trotter. I started with Trotter, and then I went to Pierce because I was like, if Trotter is the emotional, like, heavy hitter, lay the wood, kind of got some slow feet, who's going to be this shiftier guy who can actually cover a running back and who can actually, like, you know, be another guy who can read the offense, you know? So that was kind of my Antonio Pierce bias, I think. More of the ice to Trotter's fire, you know?
Yeah. Also another player that spent time at 2 NFC East teams.
Yeah, he was a stud for Washington, which I'm sure only Washington fans remember at this point, but he was quite good for them.
Yeah, so. Another Northeast corridor superstar.
That's right. He's up there with
up and down I-95 for his entire career. Trot also fits into that category.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I really like Antonio Pierce as well. I just viewed Fletcher and Trotter as like 1A, 1B, and Pierce is like a huge cliff 2, you know?
Yeah, Pierce is really good. I think Pierce is like a basically a poor man's London Fletcher, and maybe even faster when you consider the time frame that, like, we're talking about London Fletcher when he's like 33, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he's a stud, but he is older, you know? And the reasons why he's a stud is pretty much all upstairs. Like, he's a genius when it comes to football. So,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I just thought Fletch and Trot were clearly a cut above. I think Arrington and Pierce were in the same tier in my head. And like I said, I love that you got Arrington in as one of your edges, and I just think Pierce, for me, fell into that same purgatory of like not quite an edge, but also not quite good enough compared to the inside linebackers I picked, right? But just in terms of the other guys that made my cut that I'm looking at before I whittled it down to those two. Not a lot of linebackers that I actually like.
No.
I had way more linemen that I gave consideration to. And interestingly, there were no would-be football team alumni in the line, but 4 I picked as potential linebackers. There was Pierce, Arrington, Fletcher, and Rocky McIntosh.
Rocky McIntosh.
As maybe, right?
Yeah.
And then I only picked 2 Giants and I guess 1.5 Giants and 1.5 Eagles.
Yep.
With Jesse Armstead and then Dhani Jones being the crossover Giant and Eagle, and then Trump.
Yeah, Jesse Armstead was a guy I thought about. Dhani Jones I also thought about, but I was also like, was Dhani Jones like good? I wasn't like, yes, but not. Let's just put it this way. I feel like Dhani Jones was always in the Philadelphia Inquirer for like playing guitar and wearing fedoras or something. It was never like Dhani Jones is like, you know, an all pro. It was always like Dhani Jones has eclectic tastes. So
yeah. I agree with you, but I do think he was also a good linebacker. Definitely not all 2000s, all pro. I don't even know how many Pro Bowls I think he made the Pro Bowl at least once, but it wasn't like he was like a perennial Pro Bowler. I think he was just like a
he never made the Pro Bowl, turns out. I could have also said he made it once, but yeah, he did not.
All right. I thought he may have made it the one year where the Eagles were just the darling of the league and everyone made the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. I mean, he did have a year in 2003 with the Giants. He did have 120 tackles.
Yeah.
I think he was a great linebacker, but just not
great like role play, just like coach's guy. And like if you put him out at the outside linebacker position, you know he's not going to screw up, but he's also not going to like win you games.
Yeah, he just wasn't explosive enough, like as an actual athlete, to do that kind of thing. But
fun fact, I saw Dhani Jones on a boat in Manahawkin, New Jersey, when I must have been like 10. So
was he playing a guitar and wearing a fedora?
He may have been wearing a fedora. I know he was not playing guitar because he was driving a boat, and that would have been incredibly reckless.
Oh man!
But no, he apparently owned a house near my grandparents' house on the bay, on the Barnegat Bay in Manahawkin. When he was, this is actually, it was after the Eagles. He was with the Giants at the time.
Yeah,
but you know, I mean, LBI is equidistant from the Meadowlands and Philly, so it makes sense.
Right. Okay, so I just Googled Dhani Jones Philadelphia Inquirer, right? And the top headlines are Dhani Jones like playing his banjo. Dhani Jones travel-holic. Dhani Jones talking about, you know, how you can be an Instagram sensation, and then loaded with linebackers, team cuts Dhani Jones. Those are the top 4. So that's that's not. I'm really not trying to throw shade on Dhani Jones, but it was just weird how he was covered by Philadelphia media, because it was always like like sculptor and NFL linebacker Dhani Jones.
Yeah. Reminds me a bit of how they covered Connor Barwin too. Just like
right.
Always like Philly media.
This is
like
where he lives.
Enamored with like the fact he owned an apartment in like Fishtown and like went to hip concerts and stuff.
Right.
You know, but like never about like, like how deserving of a Pro Bowl spot he was or something.
Right. It's just, you got to have a guy like that sometimes.
All right. Well, that's our front 7. Actually a lot more overlap than only, I guess, 4 spots we didn't agree on, right? Interior, the D tackle, one of the DNs, one of the edges, and one of the linebackers, right?
Yeah, I think moving really 2 of the linebackers, because the Arrington Strahan, we both took Strahan, but in different spots, which is kind of what makes it confusing. But I had a couple more maybe fringy picks on the linebacker core than you did, but I will stand by Hugh Douglas until I die.
I can't believe you're dying on an hill before I am.
He was just a beast. He was just
I'm with you.
beast.
That's why, like, it is with the utmost respect that I give him an honorable mention.
Yeah.
When I gave no other honorable mention, like on the defense at all. I did give some honorable mentions on the offense.
Yeah.
Particularly at running back, that we'll get to when we get to it. But for sure. Well, that was really fun. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Until next time we do this. So I think next time we're doing the offensive line.
That's going to be another really. That one is so. I think. Do you think offensive line is more loaded than defensive line in terms of depth? I should say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think that it's ultimately going to be a fight between Eagles and Giants.
There's a good amount of that.
Like I could see a pretty intense fight across the offensive line between us two. So I do think there's at least in my initial pruning of the list, there was not a lot of Washington offensive linemen that stuck out. And there was really only like one or two clear-cut favorites from Dallas as well.
Yeah.
But the Giants and Eagles both had offensive lines worthy of Super Bowl appearance in the 2000s, you know?
Yeah. Several all-pro type guys.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is just my opinion. I feel like either the 04 team of the Eagles or the 07 Giants could have just been the 5 across the board for either of us, and it would be defensible. So it'll be interesting to see how we divvied that up. Yeah,
I totally agree. I've got some interesting. This is one where I think talking about the depth is going to be really fun. And I think what's really fun about this series in general is that it allows me to talk with more tranquility about players that I used to hate, you know?
Yeah.
How did I feel about DeMarcus Ware at the time? Like, you could not have asked me that. You know, I hated him. I would have said he was terrible. I would have said he was a fraud. Like, all sorts of very uncharitable things that I can now acknowledge. You know, were just totally emotion driven. And with the distance of time, I have found inner peace.
Yeah, and also this is arguably our most upbeat and positive podcast since we started this.
Well, that's because the teams were good then, Sean.
Yeah. And even if they weren't,
they had players.
We still look back on it wistfully now in comparison.
Right.
I feel like anyone listening to this podcast during this series is going to be like whiplash when we start talking about training camp and just like how freaking dour we are about everything else.
I know.
So I'm excited we have this bit of escapist fantasy for the next month and a half until we have to start talking about freaking training camp. Like, oh man.
We should give out a Dhani Jones award for like what player gets the most headlines while like the most like human interest headlines to conversely related to on-field production.
That's a good idea. All right. Well, I'm having fun already. Let's meet again in a week or two to talk about offensive line.
Sounds like a plan. Looking forward to it.
All right. See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.